So now that you know everything that goes into creating a competitive Pokemon, how do you build a team of competitive Pokemon? Hey guys, what is going on? Sir Squire here, back with another Pokemon Sun and Moon competitive battling tutorial for you guys. Before I get started, I do just want to point out, as I do in every single one of these videos I make, that this is meant to be a reference, it is meant to be a beginner's guide, and it is not meant to insult the intelligence of someone who is already savvy in competitive Pokemon. If you are listening to this and you are already knowledgeable in team building, in competitive Pokemon, feel free to help out newcomers in the comment section. Let's build a great battling community for everyone to help and grow, because that's how the competitive Pokemon game becomes more established, when we have more elite players. So, that being said, this team building video is not going to be like most team building videos. I've seen a lot of team building tutorials, team building videos, lots of stuff like that. And I will say, a big issue that they all have is they all assume you know. You know what I'm saying? They all assume that you know what they're talking about. But what I'm gonna say is this team building video is going to be very general. It's going to be a team building tutorial that will help you better understand different facets of Pokemon, different roles that they play, and a little bit more of an understanding of why people pick certain Pokemon for certain roles. We will be diving a little bit more specific into each of these Pokemon roles in their own thing. But for now, I just want you to kind of understand that certain Pokemon play certain roles, and they can kind of move between roles, and they can sit in a role very nicely. So with that being said, I also want to say that team building for VGC, which is the official Pokemon metagame, or Smogon rules, which is the most popular form of Pokemon battling, which is singles battling, they require different thought in team building. They don't have the same ideas. Different Pokemon have more value in one game than the other. So that's why I'm trying to be as general about this as possible, with just an understanding of how you build. And then as time goes on, as we dive into these different metagames, you will have a better understanding of why you'd pick certain Pokemon for those roles, and why those roles are more important in one tier than in the other. That being said, let's get started. The first thing you want to do when you're team building, in any metagame, in anything, the first thing you want to do is figure out what Pokemon you want your team built around. Most of the time, what people do is they pick a popular Pokemon in the game that they're playing. So if you're playing VGC, right, there are popular Pokemon that are very prevalent in PGC. There are also popular Pokemon that are in all the tiers of Smogon, like in OU, in Ubers. There's Pokemon that are always at the top tier of things. Like, I will give examples from last year. There was this team in VGC called the Big Six, which were the 6 most popular Pokemon used in VGC. And it was a very good tool if you played VGC to understand who the Big Six were, because then you were able to look back and plan around them while building your team. So the same way, you could go on Smogon and look at the most popular Pokemon in the tier you want to play, and you will easily be able to see all these different Pokemon that are there. For the most part, if you're playing the tier overused, you will see things like Landorus, you will see things like lots of Mega Pokemon are going to be there. You're going to see lots of Pokemon that are borderline broken, like Protean Greninja. Galewing's Talonflame ran rampant in 6th gen. Like, there's a lot, or like Ferrothorn. You're going to see a lot of Pokemon like that have very specific roles and can kind of teeter along the lines of other roles, but you're going to see very specific things come from them. So, that being said, you're going to want to pick your Pokemon. So, for our purposes, we're going to pick our boy Jolteon that we've been working with. Our Jolteon that we bred as an EV, we EV trained it, we got the IVs going okay, we maxed them out with hyper training, we did all this stuff through our various means now, and we want to use this Jolteon in the overused tier of Pokemon, Smogon, metagame, whatevers. So we decided we want to use this Jolteon in singles. we want to use it in the overused tier, which you can. And I will explain how the overused tier works. Probably in the next video, I'll probably do a little Smogon tutorial on how Smogon works and all that. But as far as team building goes, you have your Jolteon, right? So we already went through the base stats, we went through the natures, we went through all that. So you already know this thing has very high special attack and very high speed. So what that means is that going into working with a Jolteon, you already understand that you're going to need something that tanks a lot of hits. You're going to need something with a lot of resistances. Maybe if you were thinking in the past gens, you would pick something that was more of a steel type, like maybe an Empoleon, because water and steel are two very good defensive typings that have a lot of resistances and very little attacks that are super effective on it, or something like Heatran. Another one, steel type and fire type, very good. There's one really big weakness and a bunch of other little weaknesses that you could kind of work around. So in Jolteon's case, right, I'm not going to build a team, but I just want you to understand the roles that Jolteon plays. Now, when you build a team, you have to also figure out what role you want your Pokemon to play. So Jolteon has a few pretty good roles. Jolteon could be a sweeper, Jolteon could be a lead, and Jolteon could be a pivot. Now, all these phrases are very weird, so I'm going to basically say all these phrases first, and then at the end, I'm going to explain what they all mean. So Jolteon could be any of those three things, and it could be a few more things. But really, the three main things you would use it for is a lead, a pivot, and a sweeper. Right? So in our case, we're going to use our Jolteon as a lead. We'll give it a Focus Sash, and we will bring it in. Now, the whole reason you would bring Jolteon in as a lead is you would want it to get a quick kill or your first hit, and you switch out. So Jolteon does this very well with Volt Switch. It's very good for scouting. It's very good for phasing your opponent and guessing what they can do. One of the things you need to remember in Pokemon battling is you don't know your opponent's mindset. Sometimes over-predicting, which is something you will see a lot of competitive battlers do, is predict like 2-3 turns into a battle. It might not work very well, especially this early in the metagame, because people are still getting used to it. They might not be as deep into it as you are. So you could use your first couple of turns to really scout what your opponent might be planning on doing. Especially because now in VGC, Protect might not be as prevalent as you think it is because of Z-moves. Z-moves can go through Protect. So you might not see as much Protect spam in VGC as you normally would. Normally, that's like every Pokemon that you bring to VGC has to have Protect on it. And you kind of play mind games with the Protects, and you see like what your opponent was thinking. VGC is definitely a lot more of thinking what your opponent's going to do to you, not what you're going to do to them. You're always thinking backwards in VGC. But I will say that when it really comes down to team building, you definitely want to really gain experience. It's one of the best things I could do. Best advice I could give you is to go back and watch my series called The Perfect Team. Playlist is in the description for that. The Perfect Team is my experiment on team building. I built a team, and then I ran it through Pokemon Showdown. I ran it through Smogon. I ran it through all these different things to find its weaknesses. And then I tweaked those weaknesses, and we built a pretty darn good team. We built 2 good teams out of that. And that's how you build a team. It's all about experience. What you want to do is make sure that your types are all rounded out. You have as many physical attackers as you do special attackers. You want to make sure you have walls. You want to make sure you have tanks. You want to make sure you have at least one sweeper, setup or otherwise. Now, I'm getting into a lot of terminology here, and if you don't know what these words are, well, I have very good news for you, because I'm going to explain them right now, okay? A pivot is one of the first things I brought up. Jolteon is a pivot. There are lots of really good pivots, like Beedrill. Mega Beedrill is another really good one. Pivots are Pokemon that come in and get out as soon as they can. The reason this is useful is because it helps you gain momentum. Momentum is something that is key to winning Pokemon battles in the competitive scene. You constantly, in the singles game, you constantly want to be able to move. You want to get in and get out. You want to have the type advantage at all times. You always want to have the upper hand. So having a Pokemon that is slow with Volt Switch, like Mega Ampharos, for example, which is slow with Volt Switch, or a slow U-turner. I love Mew as a slow U-turner. You can move those, give it 0 speed, and get out after everything else, and you'll always have the advantage. You'll always get the switch. Another really good one is Umbreon with Baton Pass. Very slow Pokemon that has Baton Pass can get out and always get you the type advantage. Those pivots are very, very, very useful. Some of them are bulky, like Fortress. Fortress is another one that learns Volt Switch. It is very bulky, and it can come in, take a hit, and Volt Switch out on the switch or anything and get you into whatever you need. But that's really important. Another one that I brought up before is a lead. Now, a lead is basically just as easy as you'd think it is. A lead is a Pokemon that you put out first. A Pokemon that you designed specifically to come out first into a battle for some reason or another. Sometimes a frail Pokemon like Jolteon would run a Focus Sash, which is an item that allows it to live any one hit as long as it has full HP. So that means that you could do whatever you want on the first turn, and you'll know that you live no matter what. Dugtrio is another really good one that runs Focus Sash. It gets Stealth Rocks, Earthquake, Rock Slide. It gets some really good stuff there that you can really take advantage of to use as a good lead. It also gets Arena Trap, the regular one, not the Alolan one. And the Arena Trap definitely allows it to get a quick kill if you end up trapping the correct thing in the beginning, because Arena Trap is an ability that prevents your opponent from switching out, as long as it's not a Ghost or Flying type. So you will have a pretty good time with those kind of mons. Other leads are very typical leads, like a Ferrothorn or Fortress, or any Pokemon that can set up hazards is a very good lead, because entry hazards are really the name of the game. You always want a hazard setter on your team, especially if you know in your metagame that you're playing, if there's a Pokemon that is very weak to those, like Charizard and Talonflame, anything with fire, anything with flying. If it's fire flying, that's even worse. Or like Volcarona is another really good one, an OU that you really want to take advantage of stopping that Pokemon and crippling it before it even comes in by setting up Stealth Rocks. That said, another really good thing to have on your team is something called a Spinner. A Spinner is basically any Pokemon that learns Rapid Spin. I will have the list up on the screen for you right now. If you're curious to see the list of all the Pokemon that learn Rapid Spin, having any one of these Pokemon on your team is a very smart decision. Rapid Spin is a great move that removes all entry hazards off the field while keeping your entry hazards on the field. So you can set up a whole bunch of spikes, Stealth Rocks, Toxic Spikes, and if they set up rocks and you want to get them off, you can use Rapid Spin on their Pokemon and get rid of them. An option is also Defog. A good amount of Pokemon also learn Defog. A large amount of them are currently unavailable because it's a move tutor move. So you're going to see a lot more Spinners than you will Defoggers, at least until Pokebank is out for Sun and Moon, and then you'll see all hell break loose with Defog too. Defog clears all of the hazards off the field, including the ones that you set up. So it's a little bit more annoying because it kind of removes a lot of work that you made. You might have sacked off a Mon to set up all those hazards, and now you're going to lose them if you hit Defog. So it's definitely a little bit more annoying, but there's a bunch more Pokemon like Crobat, which is a very good defogger, Togekiss, which is also a very good defogger, that can learn it. That will definitely help you. That being said, there's also something called a Spin Blocker, which is basically any Ghost type. Every single Ghost type is a Spin Blocker. The bulkier ones, like Spiritomb, are really, really good. Spiritomb used to be the best Spin Blocker until it got Fairy type, and then it just kind of got crippled a little bit because now it used to not have a weakness at all. Sableye is probably one of the best Spin Blockers in the game right now just because of its Prankster ability. It's very, very useful. Its Mega is extremely useful, and they're all still great Spin Blockers, so those are all something great to keep in mind. But any Ghost type on your team would be a good Spin Blocker. That means that if you are facing somebody else and they send in a Pokemon to Rapid Spin your hazards away, you know immediately to switch into your Ghost type to block that spin. Because obviously Rapid Spin being a normal type move won't affect your ghost type, and it will just keep the battle going with your hazard still there. So it's definitely a very important win condition if you need hazards to win. So, and it doesn't really take anything off of your team, because all you're really doing is just adding the typing. You can make that ghost type do anything you want. As long as it has the typing, you are fine. So that being said, those are all very important. There are some other bulkier options like walls. Walls are big, bulky Pokemon that don't hit hard, but they take hits like you can't even believe. These Pokemon include the Regis, they include things like Bronzong, they include Ferrothorn, Pokemon that don't necessarily hit very hard, but their typings make them really good for absorbing hits and stalling out sweepers. These are things that you need. Speaking of sweepers and speaking of stalling out walls, there are things called wall breakers. These are Pokemon. A good example I could give you is a Choice Banded Darmanitan. That's something I had a lot of experience in the UBC. That is so strong that it's overkill. You don't need anything this strong on your team. You could have sacrificed that for maybe a little more speed, a little more something else, but the point is, if you're going to go up against something really bulky, you want to kill that thing in one hit. The big example right now in the metagame is Celesteela, the Ultra Beast that is Steel Flying. That thing is so bulky that carrying a wall breaker that knows a fire type move on your team is almost a necessity right now because of how strong that thing is. So these are all different things that you could consider in creating your team. And like I said, it all depends on what tier you want to play in. When Smogon creates all their different tiers, which they haven't done yet, but when they create all their different tiers, you will begin to see where each Pokemon lie. You will be able to identify threats, and you will be able to really work with what's in that tier to create a good team. That being said, going with walls is tanks. Now, tanks are a little bit different because tanks are Pokemon like Mega Blastoise, Venusaur, Pokemon that can take hits, but they hit really hard back. That's a good thing to have on your team. A Pokemon that can really just come in and absorb hits and take hits back, dish them right back. Having reliable recovery also really helps. Mega Venusaur comes to mind with that. With thick fat, makes it an amazing tank. Super high special attack and speed, and it can hit back with a Giga Drain and get all that health right back. And there's a lot of really interesting ones too that are going around that you could definitely really take advantage of. But walls and tanks are very similar. I would recommend, if you're starting, to stick with walls, because you should be working with the more pronounced roles. Don't go with Mons in the middle. Don't make something like a half wall. If you're going to make something a wall, make it a full wall. EV train it in full HP and full defense. Get another wall, EV train it in full HP and full special defense. And make sure they have different typings. Make sure they have moves that complement each other. Maybe even make sure one is a physical attacker and one is a special attacker. You want your team to be the most diverse it can be. And that's the truth. So, after we get through our walls and our tanks, let's see, what else do we have here? We have clerics. Clerics are support mons, and I'll actually go over support mons as a whole first. Support mons are mons that don't really attack. They're Pokemon that come in and they have a specific role, whether that's like a Prankster Murkrow, a Pokemon that Perish Traps, which is a technique where you Perish Song and trap the Pokemon in with the Perish Song so they can't leave, which is an immediate kill unless they kill you first. Definitely really good for statuses, like relaying statuses. I like to use Rotom for that, where I would have Rotom no Volt Switch and two different statuses like Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave, and then you can bring Rotom in, fire off a status, and then switch out immediately into the next thing and keep Rotom around for that reason. There's a lot of really good ways that you can incorporate support in your team. It's definitely a little bit more of a veteran role. I would say to mess around a little bit more with walls if you're just starting out, and mess around a little bit more with sweepers. And we'll get to sweepers a little bit later. But the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is clerics. Clerics are Pokemon that heal you. One of the best ones I could really think of offhand is Alamomola, or any Pokemon that knows Wish and Baton Pass. These Pokemon come in and they Wish and they Baton Pass, or they can learn Healing Wish like Latios. Any Pokemon that can heal up your team, any Pokemon that knows Aromatherapy or Heal Bell. Umbreon's a really good one for that too, because Umbreon gets Wish, Heal Bell, and Baton Pass. It's one of the best clerics in the game. There's some really, really, really good options out there for your team if you're interested going down that route. And that's not a bad route to have, because healing your entire team of statuses with Heal Bell is a great thing. You know, healing up an entire Mon with Wish and Baton Pass is a great thing to have, especially if you want to use your sweeper. Now, I will get into sweepers now. Sweepers it's a term for the Mon that cleans up. It is the most popular thing, and you should have at least one, if not two, on every team. One physical and one special is what I would recommend, especially for starting out. What you want to do is pick a Pokemon. I'm going to use Pheromosa as my example. You want to pick a Pokemon that hits super, 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 super hard. And you want it to have the most type coverage it can, and you want it to be the last Pokemon that hits the field. So this Pokemon will actually shape the way that you play, because you will be focused on eliminating other Pokemon from your opponent's team to make sure that your sweeper has a clean shot of winning the game. So, you guys understand what I'm saying here. If you picked a Pheromosa up and you decided to use it on your team, you would understand that things like ghost types aren't really going to be up Pheromosa's alley as far as things to take out. Flying types are things that it's not going to like. That means that you're going to pack Pokemon with Stealth Rocks to weaken it, Pokemon with Dark type moves to take care of those ghost types. You're going to really work around that Pheromosa and create a good wall support. You're going to bring a Rock type. You're going to bring maybe a Dark type. You're going to bring other Pokemon that'll help with the big switch-ins that Pheromosa is going to need to clean up this game. Those are really important things to consider when we talk about building a team. So, if this feels overwhelming to you, if you feel like this is just a lot of information to take in, I would say just relax. Pokemon is a fun game. Competitive Pokemon is also a lot of fun, but you also have to remember that there's a lot of really good players, and you're going to lose. Like, it's gonna happen. So the best thing you can do is build a team with your favorite Pokemon. I would suggest sticking to a tier. And like I said, VGC uses a little bit different things, like support Mons and clerics are a lot more popular in VGC because you have two Pokemon on the field. So you can have a support Mon and a hard-hitting Pokemon at the same time. That being said, sweepers are a little bit harder to come by in VGC because you can't just beat one Pokemon at a time. Most of the time, sweepers are frail, so you can't really sweep if you're working with two Pokemon versus two Pokemon. It's a little bit harder. So there's definitely a little bit more that goes into each. But if you're just starting out with team building, I would suggest go on to Pokemon Showdown. If you don't know where that is, you can just Google Pokemon Showdown and you'll find it, I promise. You're going to go there, build a team in 7th Gen OU. Build it. Make sure all the typings are diverse. Make sure you have at least 2 walls on your team. Make sure that you have 3 physical attackers and 3 special attackers. And like I said, make sure that your typings complement each other. Make sure that you don't have too much of the same type. Make sure you don't have a big glaring weakness on your team. And if you do, don't worry about it, because what you're going to do is you're going to battle. And you might lose. Yeah, you might lose a lot. But one thing you'll notice when you lose is you might lose the same way. You might realize that you lose all the time to one specific Pokemon or one specific type of move. And then that's when you adjust. That's when you go back to the drawing board and go, okay, well, how do I prepare for this attack? How do I prepare for Pheromosa or Aegislash or any other big bad Pokemon running around in Smogon right now? And that's how you adjust. That's how all the big YouTubers, that's how all the big battlers adjust, is they just build a team and go for it. And when they hit a hole, when they get the experience of playing in the tier, in the division, in the game, that's when you make adjustments. So all I can really tell you, in honesty, is the best thing you could do is gain the experience. Just go and battle. Even if you lose, it's still really valuable to you because you learn so much. You learn all about these different Pokemon that you never used. You learn all about all these different strategies. You'll pick up new movesets. A lot of the times the people are very friendly, and if you ask them for their spreads, they'll send them to you afterwards. You can very easily do this and learn very completely new ways that I don't know, that you guys don't know. You'll learn all these new strategies, and it'll help you out so much, especially if you want a ladder, depending on whatever your aspirations are. You will build a great team if you just stick with it and adjust your team over time. And that goes for VGC and Smogon. I highly recommend, if you want to do VGC, use those same principles between walls, leads, stall breakers, wall breakers, all that kind of stuff. Go in, build a team, breed that team, EV train that team, max out their IVs and hyper training, give them the proper moves, give them the proper items, and go in and take on battle spot doubles on your 3DS. And just keep going. Even if you lose, you'll learn so much. You'll learn so much. And what you'll notice when you play is that you'll see all these Pokemon appear over and over and over and over again, because that's how the metagame works. When people realize that Pokemon work, they'll use them over and over and over and over again. And then you can go, oh, this Pokemon appears all the time. All the time. Well, let me put a Pokemon on my team just to deal with that stupid thing. And then you put that Pokemon on your team and it works great. That's the best thing that you can do. So, that being said, guys, I think I've been talking for way too long now, so I hope you enjoyed. If you found this informative in any way, please leave a thumbs up down below. It really helps me out. I appreciate it. Definitely sub if you want more, or if you want more Let's Plays or battles or anything like that. Definitely do that, and I will see you guys next time. Adios.